Welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm joined by JP Mason. It's PJ and JP. Just the two of us this week again, or for a few weeks, JP, until we get our third edition nestling their way back into life on ACSOM. But this is my only appearance of the week because Celtic aren't playing, so I'm not in the match day stuff. And of course, we've got a great team of contributors who are holding the fort throughout the week. So plenty to discuss because it's the only opportunity you and I get to talk Celtic during the week. So first and foremost, were you up at Pittodrie?
No, I wasn't, and I was thinking about talking about this actually. I saw Declan's, so my glasses are steaming up. I saw Declan's post there about half an hour ago because Aberdeen have announced that vaccine passports won't be required at Pittodrie because they expect the crowds to be less than 10,000 against whoever they're playing soon. I don't know if it's Hibs and Hearts or something like that, but I watched the game in McCool's on Sunday, and I don't normally go back to a pub where I've seen Celtic get beat. I don't know if you have superstitions like that.
Well, I'll come back to that. I'll let you tell your story first.
Well, I watched a Celtic League game in there. Do you remember? Well, of course you remember. It's now part of our history when our unbeaten run ended at Tynecastle abruptly with a 4-0 scalping from Hearts.
Aye.
When Jozo Simonovic had probably one of the worst games I've ever seen from a Celtic centre half, and might be a reason why he's still not got a club. No disrespect to him, but I mean, it was a terrible, terrible performance. I mean, Kyle Lafferty made him look like an amateur defender. It was horrible. Anyway, I watched that game in McCool's, and obviously I was kind of a bit reticent to go back and watch another league game in there. But then I thought, right, I've just got to shake that off.
You need to get the monkey off your back.
I was so relieved when Celtic got the proverbial monkey off their back as well. But what irked me was looking around the stands in Pittodrie and seeing just seas of empty seats. Mm-hmm. I was just looking, going, what is going on here? How bizarre is this? And I texted somebody and said who was there, and I said, please tell me there was tickets outside or anything like that, like for the Celtic fans. And they said, no, there was just guys standing about with money in their hand looking for spares. So how bizarre a sort of financial outlet is that you've got willing paying customers standing outside with literally money in the air, like pointing towards the ground going, we have money, we want to spend it. And yet there's empty seats all over the ground and the Celtic allocation is cut. It makes no sense to me. So unless you've been to, I don't know how many games you needed to have been to go to Pittodrie at the weekend, maybe it was like 20 aways in the last 2 years or something like that. Not everybody has that. I mean, I'd like to think I'm a pretty committed Celtic fan, but not everybody has that amount of time to just spend going to away games all the time, And I fully appreciate that those people should be given priority. As for the club class, whatever it is at Celtic, where you pay through the nose for a ticket and then you get guaranteed an away ticket, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that because that's kind of elitist and it's kind of ruling out a section of the fans just because you've got more money. Doesn't really fit with the ethos of the club. So I was getting carried away there because I was quite angry. Maybe you can tell.
A bit of passion, JP. A bit of passion.
It is a bit of passion because it's a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. And couple that with Aberdeen being maniacs about their ticket allocation and not actually giving us, when they know that they're not going to have a full house. Why can they not adjust that? And I mean, if it's something to do with the layout of the stadium or whatever, I don't know. If it's something to do with that, then maybe that's an argument. But there's got to be something that can be worked out there.
Listen, I think you brought up some tremendous points to start off, or to kickstart our discussion, because the strapline is all around ticket allocation when Rangers come Colin to Celtic Park in the new year. So it all fits in. But there's a few things that you said I'm going to pick up on there, JP. The first one is Jozo Simonovic, because I did read somewhere the other week there when I was randomly checking out if he ever did find another club. And according to Transfer Market, he's still without a club. And he's been without a club now for well over a year, July the 1st, 2020. This is a player who, Celtic almost sold to Torino, remember? And he failed a medical, yeah? Mm. And he's obviously, he's got issues physically that is preventing him from passing medicals. I mean, there have been players in the past, famously John Hartson failed a medical at Celtic, failed a medical at Rangers, yet Martin O'Neill still signed them. So, it looks as though that's fallen him about. And I think that there was certain periods, that game at Tynecastle withstanding, where I looked at him and thought he was just, exactly what we needed in terms of a centre-half. I mean, when we're looking at the centre-halves we've got at the moment, and I'm pretty sure this will come up in our conversation, we don't have the style of player. I'm not going to say, we shouldn't have let him go, but we don't have the style of player, I don't think, of a Simunovic in the team right now. I remember he really did impress when he played against us in Europe for Dynamo Zagreb. We've gone out and bought him. He was a young player. He's still only 27. And when you consider that he's been out the game now for almost a year and a half, that's 25, 26 years of age. That saddens me. I take absolutely no pleasure in hearing that. Wikipedia credits him as being a player with East Bengal, but I don't know how credible that information is, because sometimes these updates can be done randomly. JP transfer market normally is quite accurate. So that was the first thing, Jozo Simunovic, and I'm guessing we will talk about centre-halves as the discussion goes on. The second one, as soon as you started speaking about that issue up at Pittodrie, I just think it's a wider issue of Scottish football. I just think that, it goes back to, remember when Barry Hearn was talking about Scottish football teams being lazy because there shouldn't be empty seats in Scottish football grounds. And I remember, listening to, it was on the Anfield Wrap a couple of years ago, where Liverpool employed somebody to make sure that there were no empty seats at their football ground. And the guy, check it out, by the way, it was a brilliant interview. And he had the same attitude as Barry Hearn. He was like, there is absolutely no way, you've got a fixture list at the beginning of the year. There is no way there should be an empty seat unless somebody buys a ticket and doesn't turn up. There should not be empty seats. It's poor planning. It's lazy. And I think that Scottish football was guilty of that. I remember a game, and it would have been one of the few games that Morten Rasmussen played for Celtic. Mm-hmm. And he didn't start, I don't think, but for a spell he partnered Robbie Keane up front against Dunfermline at East End Park. And Dunfermline, and I'm not having a dig just because it's the Pars, they couldn't manage the amount of Celtic fans that were in the stadium, to the point where they sold seats, JP, that were actually allocated for cameras, for the actual TV cameras. So there was, stanchions, and it might have taken like half a dozen seats up, just the way that it was positioned, and it was all taped off. But the Pars still sold the seats. So you had Celtic fans standing up beside the burger joint at the back of the stand. It was just a shambles. And I remember the Partick Thistle game. Again, I think Rasmussen played that day as well. It was the return of Izagiri after his broken leg. It was a friendly at Firhill. The Green Brigade were there and everything. The place was absolutely mobbed. And they ran out of pies after 20 minutes. So even when you give them an opportunity, JP, to make money, they don't know how to do it. And I think that's part of the issue up there. It's just poor planning. A lot of fans of opposition clubs, and I hear a lot of views from opposition fans on the state of Scottish football, which goes out every night at 6 o'clock on our channel. And it's interesting because you see how other Scottish football fans view Celtic and view us as football fans, JP. It's actually really insightful, but in a good way, because the contributors are very balanced. And when I look at some of these clubs like Kilmarnock, resisted for a long, long time in giving Celtic 3 stands, for example, even though we could, sell double or treble the tickets that we were selling previously. They didn't do that for many, many years, therefore refusing to make money. It's a bizarre situation, but it's Scottish football over the back. And I think that there's a few discussion points coming out. Your very first point that you made there, the first one is Celtic centre-halves. The other one is the lack of foresight in Scottish football, and indeed the lack of foresight at Celtic. And that will lead us on to the CEO scenario, because Roger Mitchell has been talking quite candidly and openly about the CEO position, because a few Celtic blogs have recommended that maybe he should be the guy to take the reins at Celtic. So we'll talk about that as well. But what we often do, JP, is we talk about the jersey that you've got hanging up on your bookshelf. And also I noticed that there's another Tim just over your left shoulder. And it's Tim Burgess.
Yeah.
There he is, the lead singer of the Charlatans. And just before we came on, I mentioned that I went through a period, probably about 3 or 4, I would say 4 albums of the Charlatans where I was absolutely obsessed with the band. And I probably have seen the Charlatans live more than any other band. Just through that 4 years, I just basically seen them whenever it was possible. But there's a reason that's up there on your shelf, and I've seen some pictures. He was at King Tut's over the last week.
It was on Monday night, yeah. It was quite surreal because the gig was supposed to be last year. And I remember, when everything happened last year and all the gigs sort of just, disappeared in an instant. I remember thinking when that gig got, at the time, I don't know if it got cancelled or if it got postponed or if there was another date. But sometimes with these small gigs, you just think, oh, well, that'll just never happen now, and I'll never get to see, I'll never, be repping that show and looking after them. But I was so relieved when there was a new date put in, and then lo and behold, the date actually happened on Monday night, and I opened the back door and there was Tim Burgess and his band, and it was great because I've been a fan since I was probably 15, 16. Seen the Charlatans a couple of times live, not as many times as you. Headlining the Wicker Man Festival was up there with one of the best festival headliners I've ever seen, to be honest, because it was just the people there that day were all about it, and it was because it was a smaller festival. It just seemed like it was a bit more concentrated and not as kind of, you're only playing to the front part that are into you, and then there's like a swathe of people at the back that could take you or leave you. Whereas like that festival everybody was about it. So Tim was doing his tour for his solo album, I Love the New Sky, and that's the album. And he signed a copy for me, and it was just dead nice. And his guy that he had with him, Nick, who was doing his merch, he's the guy that started Bands FC.
All right.
Aye, and also came up with the Twitter listening party with Tim, and came up with that idea. And so they've just announced the 1000th Twitter listening party featuring Blondie, actual Blondie. Debbie Harry's doing it with Chris Stein, and quite something what they've achieved there. Because the Twitter listening parties, if nobody knows what I'm talking about, throughout lockdown, they just got in touch with artists from small bands, to Yoko Ono did one not that long ago with Sean Lennon. They did Imagine. McCartney's done one. It's absolutely insane. You just play an album, and then everybody goes and listens to it at the same time, and then everybody kind of tweets about it, and you get patter from the band and people that were associated with the band and all that, and it's great.
It's incredible. It was something of a phenomenon, to the point where Twitter even developed its own wee emoticon when you done the hashtag, didn't it? So basically, everybody turns up at the same point on Tim's page. They all press play. Yeah, I'm doing that like it's a ghetto blaster, JP, because that's my hero. They all press play on whatever the given album is. And as you say, I think they done one with Primal Scream recently, so Bobby Gillespie was getting involved in the chat. Brilliant. But watch this space, because ACSOM are going to be ripping that off very soon. But we're actually adding to the experience. So watch this space. It will be on the channel. Bands FC, yeah, that reminds me that we're also selling ACSOM merchandise. So get onto axom.net and more merchandise will be uploaded onto the site very soon. The 1950s Shamrock top was around about that time known as the political jersey. It was a controversial jersey because it had the audacity, JP, to nod to our Irish heritage by having a shamrock emblazoned on the left breast. That was the Celtic away jersey, one that has never been reproduced by the club. A few companies out there, notably Toffs, did do a remake, but being a jersey aficionado, I was never happy with it, particularly the crest. So ACSOM have actually done our own version, and we're not breaching any copyright laws because there's no trademarked crests or names on it. and it's an absolute cracker. So I haven't yet launched that, but that's going to be available on ACSOM.net. And if you buy merch and you support the channel in that way, and we get sponsorship, etc., it allows us to create even more content. JP, that's what it's all about. Over your right shoulder, but on the left-hand side of the screen, is also a Scotland jersey. It's International Week. So it's always a slow news week when it comes to club football, but we continue to come out at 12:30, and we thank everybody for coming out and getting involved in the chat, and I'll be bringing up as many comments as possible. What's your view on the international breaks? JP, are you like me, just choking for Celtic to come back?
Aye, a wee bit, especially when I couldn't get a ticket for the weekend. To be fair, it would have been a very, very early start on Sunday morning, having got in from King Tut's at about 2 a.m. on Saturday, because I worked a band, very good band called the Joy Hotel.
Where are they from?
They're a collaborative band from Glasgow. Very kind of Morgan from the band described them as psychedelic country indie rock. I think that's what she said. But they're just a bunch of musicians who've all been in different bands, and they played on Saturday night, sold out King Tut's, and it was a really good show. Kind of Pink Floyd at sometimes. I mean, that's a bit of a lofty comparison, but they were really good. So if I'd have managed to get a ticket, I would have been operating on about 3 or 4 hours sleep. So, but yeah, I'm after you've missed a game at the weekend, you're just. I mean, if we'd been beat or drawn, then it would be even worse. But the fact that we won makes you buoyant going into this break, because you're not coming off the back of defeat, and you've not got 2 weeks to sort of stew over having lost a game. The international games, I watch the Scotland games when I can. That strip actually is. I bought that from. Do you remember in some of the sort of centres in the 90s, you used to always get a football strip shop, like in Falkirk, it was the in shops, and they had at the back of the in shops, there was like a wee football strip shop. Right? I mean, I spent a fortune in there. Got many. They would normally sell the previous season strip the season after, so you would get it sort of reduced. And I was in the Forge one a few years ago now, and they had that, and that's actually the player issue strip. So it's the one that like fits tighter to the. To the body. It's made of like a different material. Somebody once told me, and I don't know how true this is that they make them like that tighter so that people can't grab your shirt, like as easy, and to pull you back. That might be absolute nonsense, I don't know, but that's that strip anyway. I got it. I think I paid about 60 quid for it, and I think knew it was worth about 120 or 130 or something like that.
I'm all for technology with clothing, but they are very unforgiving, these modern new age football tops, JP, back in the 90s with the bagginess. It was like the fashions of the time filtered into football. I mean, you see some pictures of Jackie McNamara or Brian McLaughlin, and they're wearing these tents, they're about that wide. Unbelievable.
Imagine the sponsor are almost they're naval, because they're just too bad. Totally. The international break. I mean, the only thing I really want to come out of this international break, other than a Scotland victory, is no injuries to Celtic players, because
absolutely
we just can't. We're at a stage in the game
it's critical.
We can't afford anything. Especially, I mean, if you're an international player, the chances are you're an important player, and therefore, every one of our players that are going away in international duty are crucial to what we're doing and what we're trying to do. So, don't want that.
There's a few that we'll talk about, actually, during this discussion. We're still on the subject of Aberdeen last week. It is relevant because, obviously, we won't be playing another game until Motherwell away. However, looking at that game in isolation, JP, and the aftermath of that, and Ange Postecoglou, it was reminiscent of previous victories, important victories up at Pittodrie, where the manager and the players have gone up to obviously thank the travelling Celtic support for their support. I mean, this is a day when we went away. It was just relentless. And Ange had his own celebration, which was quite a tense celebration. It was quite intense. Not quite like Ronnie with the Ronnie Roar. I'm not sure what the Ange Postecoglou celebration is going to be, but he's pumping the old crest. He's giving it all that. There was kind of shades of various turning points in the past, and as football fans looking at every nuance of Celtic, JP, are clutching on to the hope that this might be a turning point. Did you see enough? Because I'll tell you what, it wasn't a vintage performance by Celtic, but we ground out a result. We got the result, and at this moment in time, that's all that matters. The entertaining football is great, but it's an extra as far as I'm concerned. If you want to win trophies, you want to win this league, you've got to get the results in the bag. And that's exactly what we did. Some people have said we won ugly and all these other football cliches, and we'll talk about it. But what was your thoughts overall? I mean, quite an uninspiring second half, but we had enough quality to nick the win.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously frustrating to watch because you're well aware of what Aberdeen were up to before that game, and everybody's going in thinking, right, we cannot drop points against this team today because you're pointing to all the other teams that St Mirren had just beat them 3-2. So you're immediately thinking we have to come out of here with 3 points by hook or by crook. And when Lewis Ferguson scored that goal, which was, I think probably Joe Hart should have been on it, but it was just one of those ones where it kind of took a really awkward. It came off his shoulder, looped over. Montgomery, obviously being the height he was, couldn't get to it, and then it just dropped into the net. But when that goal went in, I was just thinking, I don't care how we get 3 points from this. We have to score a goal. It doesn't. But fortunately, it was from a bit of quality and not like luck or anything. It was a well-crafted goal, and as other people, Declan and a few others have alluded to, that it was desire that got the goal in the end, because you've got Montgomery pushing into the box to make the cross, and then you've got Jota going in and sort of showing a bit of tenacity to get to it and finish it. It wasn't some of the goals he could have scored in the last few weeks would have been goal of the season. That's not the goal of the season, but it could turn out to be an important one in the sense that we needed that away win so badly. And, for anybody to, slag us off or slag Postecoglou off, as I've seen online, there's been snidey tweets about, celebrating being sixth or whatever. It's like, what, was he not allowed to celebrate a victory? No, is he just supposed to go back into his dressing room and just sort of go, well done, lads. I think given the pressure that he's been under of late and drawing with Dundee United and losing at Livingston, to experience an away victory for the first time as Celtic manager, I have no issue with him celebrating, and I don't think it was over celebrating either. I mean, God, I remember being up at Pittodrie once where Martin O'Neill took the players into the dressing room and then came back out with them after, 5-10 minutes, because we'd been kept in, as we usually are, and the Celtic fans were still, I think we were singing, we're going to win the league, we're going to win, and it just went on for about 15 minutes, and the players all came back out and were just standing, looking, going, it's amazing. So I don't have a problem with celebrating victories.
No, because you're not celebrating being sixth in the league. You're celebrating a hard-won victory up at Pittodrie, our first away win since the 14th of February last year. And let's be honest, JP, we don't have to justify ourselves to a lot of the people who are sniping aren't Celtic fans. It's one of these things where you've got to keep your own house in order. That was an important win for Celtic. It was an important win for Ange Postecoglou, and we're entitled to celebrate it for a week and a half whilst there's no club football. But I mean, when some of the names you mentioned there, talking about crafting the opening for the winner, Jota. At the top of the week, there was a discussion around whether the Jota, Kyogo, Abada front line could become iconic. It wasn't suggesting that each individual player would be an icon. It was more of a iconic trio in the kind of same mould as the three amigos, who, we still look fondly back on. But between the three of them, only one trophy was won by Van Hooijdonk, Cadet, and who's the other one? Di Canio. And the other guy that was part of that team, Andy Tom, always seems to be in their shadow, even though he was, a technically gifted footballer, absolutely. But of the three players I just mentioned there from the 90s, we only won one cup. It was a Scottish Cup against Airdrie in 1995 when Pierre scored the winner. The actual comparison was, in fact, focusing on the trio. We've got a front line there, which is very, very exciting to watch. We know all about Kyogo. Jota, for me, is in the few games that he's played, has given us enough promise to suggest that we should already be looking at the deal that would keep him here permanently. People think that you're being a bit premature with that, JP, but if you don't make a decision on things like this, then you could be left wondering what might have been. I mean, we've lost a lot of players who have come in on loan and made a big impact because perhaps we haven't made the moves early enough. And I know we do have an option on Jota, £6.5 million. We've got a first refusal on him come the end of his 1 year loan deal. So he's looking the real deal, and he can give us that cover on the left or on the right. But I think one of the things I was more impressed with is the fact that he was willing to dig in. I mean, there was a few coming togethers between him and the highly rated Aberdeen fullback, who, incidentally, I think has a big, big future, Calvin Ramsey. But, he needs to stop being a bit of a greeting-faced wee right back as well, because he was coming across a wee bit like that. Handful of games, there is discussions around him signing for one of the big clubs down south. Is he a player that Celtic should be looking at?
I mean, these players have good games against us and then, could fall off the radar from time to time. I mean, there's already people questioning Doig at Hibs now.
I saw that, yeah.
People sort of saying, where's the fuss? And that, I think that's actually coming from Hibs fans as well. I've seen a few Hibs fans comments. I know quite a lot of Hibs fans, and, I don't really know if he's still considered the, £4 million, £5 million player that they might have thought he was at one point last season or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, he did play well. There's no question. I mean, Aberdeen pretty much played well within themselves. They didn't set the world on fire, but I mean, they obviously played a lot better than they have done in previous weeks because we didn't give them a hiding. If they had been playing like they had done in previous weeks, then the chances are we would have. But I mean, it's always the same when Celtic or, well, maybe not Rangers, sometimes they don't turn up against Rangers. There's this myth that Aberdeen play well against Rangers when they don't really. I can't remember it, but I think they played well as a whole. Scott Brown, weird as anything seeing Scott Brown playing against Celtic. That is one of the strangest things I think I've ever seen. I was just, especially when he was jousting with Beaton at a corner. I mean, he nearly scored, God, that header. That had gone in. I mean, I'm trying to imagine what would have happened. Would they have ran over and done the Bruni? Would they have not celebrated? It was that close to a goal. You're thinking, what's the next step? But I thought it was a good game. And just on the ticket thing, I'm not expecting Aberdeen to give us 3 stands like Livingston or anything crazy like that. But surely there's got to be a happy medium for the next time we go up there, because I mean, I've not been up there for about 4 years. That last time I was there was the Tierney goal when he ran the length of the stadium to celebrate. And a mixture of that has been away or whatever, but then there's also been times I've been here and just you can't get a ticket because of this allocation thing. So hopefully it can be worked out. And I guess that goes towards the headline today about Rangers and what we do with that. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, let's have a wee chat about it, because as I've said, I just think that there's so much in terms of passion, and there's such a fan base for Scottish football, JP, that it's completely mismanaged by most clubs, let's be honest. I mean, I used to keep tabs on a Twitter follower who would give you the European figures in terms of population and fan base and percentage of which, and Scottish football was always really, really high in that table, when you look at, the actual population of the country. So it's one of these things that instead of embracing, I think that football clubs are out of touch, and that's across the board, and Celtic in many, many ways are part of that issue. We find ourselves now, after the announcement that the red zones are going to be removed and away fans will be allowed back into stadiums as normal, we've got to question what is the normal now between Celtic and Rangers when it comes to the fixture. So the next game will be Celtic versus Rangers on the 2nd of January at Celtic Park. And I'm looking at that thinking, well, obviously Rangers did what they did last time round at Ibrox, whereby we were promised this reduced allocation, which I think must be the minimum, JP, because the rules state that the away club should be given, under normal circumstances, a reasonable amount of tickets. And I'm guessing that Rangers have taken that right to the nth degree, and we've found out that the reasonable or the bare minimum that can be given is 750, and that was what was promised. When we played them last time round at Ibrox, the tickets were printed up and they were sitting up at Celtic Park, the club informs us, and Rangers made a very late shout to suggest that, no, you're not getting any tickets. So obviously it was a full house at Ibrox, and it was all Rangers fans who were in attendance. It's not the first time Celtic fans have been locked out of Ibrox, JP. Those of a certain vintage will remember back in the 90s when it was the same scenario. So there was quite a lot of things around that I thought were good discussion points. The first one was, it was a fantastic opportunity, JP, for Dominic Mackay, because this is going to feed into the CEO discussion we're going to have. Dominic Mackay had an opportunity there to stand up for the Celtic support and actually to nail his name to the mast and say, listen, I'm not going to allow Celtic to be pushed around here. I'm going to stand up for the fans. He didn't do that. Rangers were allowed to do whatever they pleased during that scenario. And the question, I guess, is, has this set a precedent? Because they had already set one by allocating us a reduced ticket allocation, and that was repaid, and Celtic give them a reduced ticket allocation. This is what I was talking about earlier on. You get a good view of other football fans' perceptions of Celtic, and obviously the goings on between Celtic and Rangers. And I think that the neutral fan reckons that the absence of the normal allocation is affecting the atmosphere of the game. So first and foremost, and I'll ask you as a Celtic fan, would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah, and it's not just neutral. Like, many Rangers affiliated people have said the exact same thing. Ali McCoist, for one, I've heard him talking about it, and he thinks it's a nonsense. I'm pretty sure Barry Ferguson's on record as saying it as well. Not that I normally listen to what these guys say, but I mean, they're talking about something that involves me, essentially, because I would be there as a fan of Celtic and have been there as a fan of Celtic. I've not been able to get a ticket for Ibrox since, out with COVID, I've not been able to get a ticket for Ibrox since Eddie's 3-2 10-men game, because that's after that they cut the allocation, and you're then into the sort of top points scorers, your Paul the Tims, your whoever else, guys that have been going week in, week out for years, not missing games. Totally get that they should get the tickets, but then you're left with the wider Celtic support or away support who've got absolutely no chance. They're locked out. And for regard to this scenario, I think, and I'm not just saying this, as a way to get one back at them or anything like that, but I mean, it has to be the case that we don't give them any tickets for the next game. They had the advantage of a full house of Rangers fans against a very inexperienced Celtic side who, actually came away with a bit of respect. We didn't get trounced. We had been trounced the last time we were there. It was pretty horrible watching, a 4-0, 4-1? I can't. It was 4-0.
It was 4-1, and it was just that realisation of how things had flipped so dramatically, JP, from those days not that long ago, where we were giving them humpings home and away, to the point where it really was a case of how much is it going to be today, and that was a massive realisation that the tables had turned dramatically. Yeah,
especially having to come on here and talk about it afterwards, and having sat and watched it, on your own in a flat, and it was an empty stadium. Do you know what I mean? It just, everything about that felt so weird. Like, if it didn't feel weird enough anyway with the result, the actual circumstances in which you were watching the game just made it feel all the more strange. I just found it really unsettling. So this time, Celtic Park, they've had an advantage of a full house of their own fans. We should be, to level that up, we should have that advantage. What happens after that is then between the clubs. I don't think that they're going to renege, because let's face it, they don't their saying or their motto is no surrender. So what chance have we got if we're going to try and get tickets back for that game? Unless somebody with a sensible head comes in and goes, right, this is ridiculous. Let's do this. Let's go back to how it was. We've got people on both sides who all think that this is how it should be, but yet you're going to continue with this.
It's, when you're talking about the advantage, yes, there has been the unfair advantage of that one fixture where our fans weren't there, JP. So I absolutely get that. I think it's an opportunity for both clubs to say, you know what, this reduced capacity, the reduced allocation rather, is 750 to 800 tickets. Let's bury that. Let's go back to what it was. Let's ensure that Celtic fans get the broom loan. And let's return to a situation. We don't want to be pals, JP, but it's just about, that's balance, and that's just being sensible for their allocation to return to what it was, and similarly for ours to return to it was. What they've also got to realise is that as a spectacle, we've been speaking, it actually ties into what we spoke about at the top of the show. As a spectacle, when you're looking at a brand, when Scottish football is viewed as a brand, the only thing that any company, any broadcaster, any sponsor is looking at is the Celtic versus Rangers derby. How sellable would Scottish football be? And it's no disrespect, it's just a fact. It's always been a fact. Pre-2012, post-2012, that is what broadcasters are interested in. It's what sponsors are interested in. Is that brand being damaged? And that is something that the clubs have to look at as well, because when you're looking at sponsorship and broadcasting within Scottish football, it is massive. It's a huge part of the consideration when you're looking at budgeting for that year. And therefore, I just think it just needs that sensible head. But it seems as though the clubs are at loggerheads on this. Even if Celtic were to suggest it, JP, I don't think it would be taken on board.
No, I just think it's depriving. Not only is it depriving our fans of being able to go to Ibrox and watch a game. I know some people don't go out of principle or whatever. I've been quite a few times and I've seen us win there. I've seen us lose there. It's depriving their fans as well. I mean, of an opportunity of going to Celtic Park and seeing a goal or a win, or whatever. They've obviously beaten us at Celtic Park now for the first time in however long. Quite regular, well, not regularly, but a couple of times recently they've beaten us. They've deprived their fans of that moment. Let take away the rivalry. They've deprived their fans of enjoying a moment because of their ridiculous decision, and so I'm surely their fans are like, well, we want to go to that game. Can you not just sort this out? We want to go to that game. We want to see us score against them if we're going to score against them. I mean, I hope that isn't the case, obviously, when they do come, God forbid, but there is an opportunity. And if you're looking at it as a club responsible for their fans, they're not doing their fans a solid, no, that's not the right word. They're not doing their fans justice by giving them tickets for that game, because they should be looking after their fans, and that is not what they're doing. All they're thinking about is depriving us of tickets for their ground. They're not thinking about what they're depriving their own fans of. Yeah. Because there's loads of guys that are doing the exact same thing as we are, going to Rangers games every week in, week out, and then it comes to Celtic Park and they have the exact same scramble for tickets, and it's just stupid.
It is, but a lot within Scottish football could be put into that category, JP. Loads of comments coming through. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. We appreciate that it is an international break as Tosh the Coglu Junior Malone comes in to remind us it is, so there's less to talk about in the world of Celtic, but the 12:30 bulletin stays where it is. We come on every single day and we talk about it. Now, this isn't the full Boona, if you like, in terms of a Celtic State of Mind. This is our daily bulletin. We create other content which is up on the channel. We have another show called the ACSOM Retrospective that looks at the kind of historical elements of the club, JP. So if we get somebody in for an interview, for example, or we want to look at a new Celtic release. So we spoke about the Johnny Doyle book recently. This weekend, you will be able to watch an interview that I did a wee while back with Billy Stark, the centenary hero. Billy Stark, one of the nicest men on the planet, big friend of the late, great Tommy Burns. And I met him up at Hampden a while back. We've done an interview. It's going to be available in full on the channel for the first time. And Kevin Graham's Screamer Celica is back. We recorded the rebooted version of that show, fully filmed, fully produced by our wizard in the studio, Kelvin, and that's going to be coming out very soon as well. He's mixing it up a bit. He's going to be speaking to Johnny Proctor, who's an author, and Johnny wrote a trilogy of books which covers 1990, 1996 and the noughties, and so they delve into those eras, JP. The only thing that's a wee bit different is Johnny's a Dundee United fan, so they talk about memories of those eras between Celtic and Dundee United. You cannot miss it. It's tremendous. So that's coming on the channel as well. So what we keep reminding you to do is get onto the YouTube channel and subscribe. And just by subscribing, clicking on the subscribe button, you go into monthly prize draws. This month, JP, signed Bobby Lennox print in a frame, beautifully done. You can even come to the studio to pick it up. So get subscribing. Oh, and there's also an Etiv watch. It's just over there, but I can't reach it. But I will show you at some point in detail this watch that one of our sponsors has provided, and we'll be giving that away as well. It's a cracking watch, by the way. It would be a lovely gift for Christmas. So what else is coming through? Let's have a look. Richie Rich comes in to remind us also that actually we are reverting back to the rules normality, whereby we will actually end up getting fined if we don't give the away fans tickets. But then I think there was a breach of the rules the last time, because Rangers were making their own rules up by saying Celtic need to give us assurances that we'll get tickets for the 2nd of January. Until this week's announcement, we couldn't give them that, because we didn't know what the situation was going to be with the red zones. Jake Ryan comes in with Liam Scales called up to the Ireland squad yet, and claims he's not up to speed. He's been called up, yet he's not up to speed. He's been playing for the Rovers all summer and in Europe. All signs point to Ange not having faith in Scales, or perhaps he wasn't an Ange signing. You mentioned Montgomery earlier, and I said we were going to talk about the 3 players who were involved in the winning goal. Montgomery, I thought, played an absolute blinder with that pass. It was a cracking pass, really inviting Jota to get anything on the end of it. Brilliant. Really, really well done. And I said after the game that I like Montgomery far more offensively. I really do. I mean, see when he goes for a run, JP glides past players. He's got a real knack of doing that. He glides past players. I think he's a very, very talented young man, but I'm not convinced he's a left back. I really am not convinced he's a left back. We've heard that Greg Taylor's going to be out until November. Do you stick with young Monty? Or does Scales get a run? I mean, I know every game at the moment's a must-win. We're going to Fir Park next. It's going to be tough. Motherwell are doing really well. Do you stick with Montgomery?
It would seem that he would probably stick with Montgomery, given that he put him in the team on Sunday. But I think maybe Scales getting called up is a good thing, because he'll be able to take a look at him if he gets a game for Ireland. I don't know if he will get a game for Ireland or not. I don't know what their setup is like and where they're at in terms of who plays where and when. But I think he the Scales thing's weird, because it seems like, as the guy said in the comment there, that Scales was playing for Shamrock Rovers before he arrived. It's not as if he's been out and had no pre-season, no games, and then he's come to us and it's just like, bench 15, 20 minutes against Wraith Rovers or whatever it was. So I would hope that being away with the international team would lead them towards getting a chance to play again. It just seems strange that he wouldn't, because he seems like not experienced, but he's got more experience than Montgomery, and I wouldn't want the pressure to sort of be thrown all onto Montgomery to be like, you need to perform week in, week out. It's all on you. Because what age is Montgomery? Is he 18, 19?
I was going to say 19. I'll double check while you're talking there. But I just think there was a comment made by Ange Postecoglou where he was talking about Ralston, and he says, he can't play 50, 60 games a season. I think, we've got to be very careful with Adam Montgomery. He's only 19. It's only 19. We really need to be careful of that as well. Yeah, give him enough game time, JP, but make sure we're not going to burn him out. I liked Scales' physicality. I know we only saw him for 15, 20 minutes against Wraith Rovers. I just liked his physicality. He was confident on the ball. I'd like him to get the next challenge in a Celtic jersey, because I know that we were playing a championship club that night, and I'd like to see him, ideally introduced at a game at home where maybe we're a goal or two up and we can bring them in and edge them in like that, because I do have concerns about the step up. There is a step up. I know he's been playing European football, but I do feel it's a wee bit strange we've not seen more of him. There's a few comments coming through saying that we are being infiltrated on the comment section by fans of another club. Now, a lot of people don't actually think I'm in the studio with anybody and I've got an imaginary friend, but I'm going to turn over to my right here and ask Kelvin if he can switch on subscriber commenting only, because that's what we do. Unfortunately, we can't stick it on as a default setting, so every single time we need to remember to do that. And Kelvin does exist, and he has just switched it on. So we shouldn't get any more comments of that ilk. And the final man who was involved in that move, JP, Tommy Rogic. Now, we spent a fair bit of time leading up to the game talking about how I certainly don't feel that Rogic and Turnbull can be utilised as starters in the same team. I think we've only got room for one of those guys, one of those number 10s, if you like. I don't think Turnbull's a number 8 beside Callum McGregor. I think he's your number 10. And if that's the case, it's between him and Rogic. Whoever's on form and fit starts the game. I don't think we can start with the pair of them. And then Rogic comes in, and it's a bit of magic, really, that crafts open that chance. What's your take on this, the Tommy Rogic and David Turnbull debate?
Well, I mean, I didn't see or watch a lot of David Turnbull for Motherwell before he signed for us. I know he was obviously injured for quite a number of months in that time. But, I mean, he was a number 10 for Motherwell, right? So why would we suddenly try and change him into a different type of midfielder at Celtic just because we're short on numbers? I think that's a bit unfair. It's kind of like asking a striker to play right back or something like that. I know it's still in the midfield, but it's not where he can properly influence the game or, you know, maximise his impact in the game. Rogic has been frustrated. Rogic is the type of guy that, like, that came off for him on Sunday. There's so many other things that he's done in recent times that could have come off, but they just haven't. And then you see him sort of picking himself up off the ground and jogging back, and you're just like, right, okay, you know, that nearly worked, but it didn't work. So, you know, give us something else, you know, because somebody replied to a tweet of a guy doing all this fancy trickery, feetwork trickery, and said Tom Rogic does this about 3 times a game. And he does do magic stuff, but it's not often that it actually comes to anything. I've seen him do a lot of great stuff recently, but we've been beaten or we've drawn or whatever, you know. So it's all very well, you know, like absolutely skinning somebody or keeping the ball while you're on the ground and then getting back up and then running away with it. But, you know, if you just hit a brick wall when you run away with it, then all of that was for nothing. So, I mean, that was like a proper Tom Rogic vision, end product, good ball, goal. You know, that's what we want to see from him more. And, you know, hopefully we do see that more going forward. And if he's, you know, played in the right balance of midfield, because I think that's maybe what's been affecting his performance, possibly. Either that or he's just not up to, you know, repeated game after game. Like people have said as well, you know, they don't expect Tom Rogic to play 2 games a week.
I think there's a combination here. And I think it was really evident, you know, when we were playing Bayer Leverkusen, that the system that we play doesn't allow for the luxury of Tom Rogic. I think that there are things he does with the football. It's like he's got a magnetic toe at times. That ball doesn't leave him. And nobody else in the park can do it. But it doesn't happen that often. And when it does happen, it doesn't always result in us creating a chance, JP, which is exactly what you say. When it comes off, it looks absolutely magnificent. Yeah. But the way that we've kind of shaped this up with Ange's philosophy and his tactics, as well as his philosophy, is that we need an engine room. We actually really need an engine room. And at the moment, when you look at the midfield, and the reason we need an engine room is because of the high press and the attacking to defensive transition, and the fact that we're very poor at that transition because we don't have the players that track back and win the ball quickly, like Ryan Christie, who was brilliant at that. Mo El-Yunusi was very good at it as well. For as much as I love Abada and Jota, I don't think they're that great at it. to be honest. Turnbull is probably better at it than Roderick. Roderick's not very good at it at all. So what you've been left with is Callum McGregor doing a lot of that work, and he needs someone else in there with him to be able to deal with that transition when the attacks break down. I don't think it helps when you've got inverted fullbacks, because it leaves a lot of space, obviously, behind them in the flanks, and that's why we've seen so much occasions where the two centre-halves have been exposed. So for that reason, I think that I would go for Turnbull as your number 10. I would keep Roderick as that weapon on the bench. I think he's very handy. And of course, if Turnbull's form dips or he needs a wee rest because he can't play 50, 60 games a season, then you've got that option of flipping it between him and Roderick. And I think that's the way we should utilise those two players. McGregor needs somebody partnering him as someone who I think is going to be a wee bit more of a deep-sitting midfielder, the defensive qualities of which would need to be impressive. And I think that McCarthy was probably bought as that player, but he's not been quite fit enough to be playing the game, starting 2 games a week. And he's not impressed really that much, to be honest with you. I think Dundee United was disappointing for other reasons because he got injured. But he, for me, would be the first pick when fit. But what we did is we brought in Nir Beaton, and he played that number 6 role. And I thought he was pretty effective. Like you said earlier, it was strange to see him coming up against Bruni. He should have scored a header himself. Beaton, he should have burst the net with that. But I think he played okay. He played fairly well in that position. Do you think that Postecoglou's recognised that and is going to continue to play him in that number 6 role? Also gives McGregor a wee bit more freedom.
Well, I was led to believe that Ange Postecoglou liked Beaton early on as a centre-back, which obviously we're all glad that experiment is over, because he's not a centre-back. There's no way you can tell me that you can chuck as many stats at me as you like, but there's no way that Nir Beaton's a centre-half. I have no issue with Nir Beaton playing centre midfield. I was actually quite glad to see him come in, because he's definitely a better option than Sorrow. I think, he's more experienced, he's more calm in the ball. Certainly don't think he's the answer going forward. And I don't think he's going to, as I'm saying this now, I don't think he's going to suddenly rack up. If you consider the amount of appearances he's made over his 8 years at Celtic, it would be a wee bit mad or weird if he suddenly, played like 30 or 40 games this season, having never done it before. But for now, absolutely happy for him to come in and do a job. That is ultimately why we're paying him thousands of pounds a week. Let's not forget that. It's not like he's not like he's there as as a tourist or anything like that. He's a paid member of the squad, and it's probably about time that he earned some of that. Because
no, you're right. He's not a water carrier, is he? I mean, he's one of the highest earners due to the fact that he's been here for 8 years now, just over 8 years. And when you look at the performances that he's had this season, it's been a mixed bag. I think that the Midtjylland thing left a bad taste in many Celtic fans' mouths due to the fact that he let us down that night. Simple as that. And that was during a game where we needed our experienced players to do anything but that. He's made 241 appearances for Celtic over an 8-year period. Now, that's starts and substitute appearances, JP. That's an average of 30 a year. So like you say, you're not expecting him to all of a sudden start 40 or 50 games when he's accumulated and amassed 30 appearances a year. And quite a lot of them were substitute appearances as well. There's a few other areas of the park that I'm sure will become discussion points in the weeks to come. But one thing I wanted to raise, you mentioned Sorrow there. Sorrow's fallen off the face of the earth. He's not been in the squads. And neither has Bolingoli. Now, I find this strange, and, I think it needs to be questioned, not because I think Bolingoli should be playing left back for Celtic, but he was completely out of the picture. He wasn't in the squads. He wasn't named in the Europa League squad, right? So you're kind of thinking, well, he's not going to be in the plans. All of a sudden, he jumps from what would have been, fourth choice left back to first choice left back against Livingston. And then back to fourth choice left back. I find that a little bizarre, JP. Can you think of the reasoning behind that?
absolutely not. No, I really, really don't get it. It was almost as if like, was that just him giving him a chance? Had they been speaking to the manager and saying, "Look, give me a chance. I'll show you what I can do," or whatever? Who knows? It would be interesting to be able to ask the manager that question. Like if there's another opportunity to speak to him as a fan presser or something, and just say, "Look, you brought Bolingoli back for Livingston. Can I ask why?
What was the rationale?
What was the rationale behind that? Because he was so far out of the picture for he hadn't kicked the ball since the whole going to Spain debacle, had he?
Well, Kilmarnock was his last game. I know that he made an appearance or two pre-season, JP, but competitively, that Kilmarnock game was his last appearance for Celtic.
Yeah. So what happened to suddenly? I know he then got. Wait, did he go out on loan after?
He did.
Yeah, he did. He went to Turkey, didn't he?
He ended up playing in the Champions League
against Man United. He did not beat Man United actually. So, So I don't understand the Bolingoli thing at all. It seems so strange that he would be that far out of the picture and then not just brought back in to be on the bench, brought back in to start what was and is, a vital. Every league game is vital.
Difficult fixture.
Yeah, really tough fixture where we haven't won for ages. Like, was it something to do with the pitch? Was it something to do with the opponent? Had they identified something in the opponent that they thought Bolingoli could exploit? Who knows? Like,
can I speculate?
Yeah,
if I may.
Yeah,
I think that Ange Postecoglou is maximising his squad, and he's had a wee look at Bolingoli during the pre-season, and he's thought perhaps that it would be a good idea to rest Montgomery. Going back to the comments that he made about Ralston, he's a young boy, he can't play 50, 60 games. He needs backup. So your other option at that point is Bolingoli. So he's played him. And he probably wouldn't have been disappointed with his performance. I think overall Celtic were really poor. But Bolingoli wasn't any more poor than various other players on the park. It's not as though he was a 4 and everybody else was a 6.
No.
And I'm wondering if there's been influence from elsewhere within the club after that. Because he's just disappeared. I'm speculating. You're allowed to speculate from time to time.
No, it's a fair point. I mean, I wonder, is he a popular person among the players? I mean, he definitely was amongst the bench guys, obviously, because they're pals. I've seen comments on his Instagram. I remember even not long after the whole drama with him going away, he posted a picture about being in Turkey, and all these Celtic players who, I'm talking about, Karamoko Dembele, Odson Edward, were all commenting on his Instagram with fire emojis and going, "Oh, on you go, bro," and all that. And I'm like, are you not raging at the fact that he caused this absolute chaos for our club by doing what he did? Completely disrespectful. And also, not just that, more importantly, risking people's lives, and essentially by not, admitting that he'd been away and potentially could have been exposed to the virus or whatever. I mean, it was so strange to me. And I commented to a friend about that, and they just said, well, they don't care. They don't care. So I don't know what his standing is right now in the Celtic squad, whether or not the players there have time for him or don't. I don't know what he's like as a person. We've never really heard from him as a Celtic player. He's never really spoken in interviews. Don't really know anything about him.
Maybe the club should allow us a press conference with Bolingoli.
to find
That'd
out.
Be good. By the way, listen, I think you make a good point saying that if you get the opportunity to speak to Ange Postecoglou, we were obviously given that opportunity with his introductory press conference that was infamous for other reasons. We've never had the opportunity since then. But the reason I bring it up, JP, is it was such a bizarre reappearance, and then away back to your darkened room, because he's a player that can't play for the B team, right? Mm-hmm. He's a player that is on a decent enough wage. If you buy somebody for £3.5 million, they'll be on a decent enough wage. You're on a first team player's wage, and we're not utilising them. We've got a tool there that we're not using. And I am speculating, but the big issue isn't ball and goalie. The big issue would be if there is interference away from the football department. And the reason I'm speculating is because we know there's been interference outside of the football department for years at Celtic, and I'm just hoping it is not continuing.
I'm really hoping the same, because that was the one thing last year that we spoke about quite a lot on here, that we didn't want people meddling or interfering in an area of the club that wasn't really any of their business, and we were talking about bringing a new manager, and the one thing that we were all saying was that we wanted them to have full control over the football situation. And if people are, forcing the hands of the manager to play players or not play players or things like that, and that is just the worst scenario. And I'm sure there's probably people watching this that are going, "Oh, that's exactly what's happening." That's speculation on their part because they don't know, but there's so much previous with Celtic that you would think that it's certainly a possibility. It's not something you completely rule out.
Yeah, and again, the reason I bring it up, because I know that if you make some outlandish comment without any basis other than the fact that you're speculating, people have an issue with that. Well, there's a couple of other examples. Whose decision was it to tear up Olivier Ncham's contract when we're short in midfield? And it's going to cost the club money to get rid of the player, love him or loathe him. As much of a, some people might think he was a bad influence in the dressing room. As much of an influence as he may have been, he technically is a very gifted footballer in a position where we are lacking. Whose decision was it? And I'm not saying it was the wrong decision, to give Lee Griffiths a 1-year contract and then punt him a few weeks later because of his behaviour. I'm merely asking the question, because if it is interference outside of the football department, JP, then nothing seems to have changed. And we are talking about change, and I know that we're over the 1 hour mark, but let's run with the CEO question anyway. Charlie McGarvey brings it up. Well, Lowell and Desmond are there undermining the CEO. It doesn't matter who they appoint, and no CEO worth his salt is going to accept that. Well, I thought we had one worth his salt when we appointed Dominic Mackay. So, the fact that we now have someone who has been promoted on an interim basis internally, is that something that you think is going to be a permanent move? It seems to me, JP, that we wouldn't let an outsider back in on such a lofty position.
Well, that would you could certainly draw that conclusion from the little that we know about the whole situation. We're still all completely in the dark about why Dominic Mackay was there and then wasn't there. We don't know. He's not allowed to say, probably because of what's the clause that you put in?
Confidentiality, disclosure.
Yeah, disclosure.
NDA.
He'll not be allowed to say anything. So we don't know from his side what happened. There hasn't been any leaks of any validity or certainty about what happened. So we're all just left wondering why that happened and what the future holds for that position, because there was so much song and dance made about him coming in and the position and how important it was, and how he was in charge of what was going to be changed at Celtic and everything else. Does that position suddenly not have importance anymore because he's not there? I'm pretty sure it's still a massively important role. That can he just be given to somebody that's within the club just because they've been there for a while or because they're pals or whatever? There can't be that sort of nepotism. Is that the right word?
It is, and I think, as good a candidate as Michael Nicholson is, I think there's always going to be a suspicious kind of eye on that appointment due to the nature of this nepotistic kind of attitude that Celtic have. But the thing for me was the time was right to bring in a fresh set of eyes, because Peter Lawwell is successful on the balance sheet as Celtic had been, and obviously on the trophy front. It was also during a period of huge upheaval in Scottish football with the demise of Rangers, JP. And I think that, the situation Celtic were in, and the one that was overseen by Peter Lawwell, was quite unique in the fact that they were without their biggest rivals for the first time in over 100 years. And once that challenge re-emerged, I think that you required a different approach to that, and you had to take stock of what it was you wanted for Celtic. Did you want Celtic to be the top dogs in Scottish football? Or indeed, did you want to have a vision on a European basis? And I think that, interestingly enough, and I would ask anybody to go back on ACSOM's back catalogue that you'll find on YouTube and listen to the interview I did with Roger Mitchell about a year and a half ago. And we spoke about Scottish football, and we spoke about Celtic. And I think that certainly what he says is something more in keeping with what I want for Celtic in terms of a vision on a European level, JP. I never hear Celtic Football Club speaking like that. What you see year on year is a statement that comes out when we obviously file the accounts and you get the lovely package coming through your door if you're a shareholder. And the statement this year was talking about something of an achievement coming second in Scottish football. It was talking about Celtic's strategy as being bringing in players, developing them and then making money off them. I never saw anything on there in terms of being a European superpower. We don't even make a whimper in Europe. And I just think that if someone comes in to try and restructure the club and has a modern view of what football is and what Celtic can achieve on a worldwide level, then it would be far clearer than it has been for the last 20 years.
I think they'll be leaving. I don't think they're going to do anything on that front until the end of the season. I think they're going to just try and ride it out like they tried to ride out the Neil Lennon situation last season. I think they're going to try and ride this out and basically close their eyes and hope for the best. And that is a horrendous strategy to have, but I don't really know. I can't offer an alternative, but then I'm not on a highly paid salary to make those decisions. They are. And, time will tell what the right one is and what the wrong one is.
I read a good article around the success of Park when he was bringing in players, and obviously Celtic were making a huge profit on many of them, not all of them. And I think that year ended with the departure of Ryan Christie, who was the kind of last from that stock, JP. And you've got to look at, right, what is our strategy in terms of recruitment? It's all fine and well saying we buy young and sell at a profit. But that became fewer and further between, the more players we were bringing in. And in the last couple of years, the recruitment policy has been shambolic at best. I think this season we've seen a wee bit more quality coming in. But, that's part of the overview. That's part of the structure and the modernisation that we were hearing from Don Mackay. He's no longer at the club. The club have been silent on where we're going from here. They don't tell season ticket holders like you and me, or shareholders like many of our listeners, what the plan is. You get your annual statement coming out in a nice glossy document to say one of our achievements this year was finishing second. And it's not good enough. And we need a different approach. And it's lazy. I think it really is complacent because Celtic are such a huge brand on a worldwide basis. But even though we keep hearing that, I don't think we capitalise on that either. We don't go to Ireland and engage with our fans in Ireland anywhere near enough. We don't engage with our fans in Australia, America, and elsewhere in the world. We just don't do it as a football club. And we should do it a lot better. But we could probably do several podcasts and broadcasts on that subject, JP. I've ran over a wee bit and I must apologise. One thing I didn't ask you though is you were talking about the charlatans earlier on. Another good Tim on your bookshelf there is Tim Burgess. What is your favourite Charlatans album?
Us and Us Only, 100%.
Oh, brilliant, yeah.
1999.
My Beautiful Friend.
Yeah,
Forever.
Forever, Impossible, all those. Because I got it just before I went to live in Nice for uni. And while I was in Nice, this is pre-Spotify, obviously, all I had was the mini discs that I had. So I had like 10 or 15 mini discs. And then it was either that or French radio. And French radio was actually quite enjoyable for a laugh, some of the madness that they played. But mini discs is what I had, and Us and Us Only was one of those. So I told Tim Burgess this other night, actually, I said, that album immediately takes me back to that time. Every time I hear it and every time I hear a song from it, I just think of living in probably one of the most beautiful places I'll ever live. I mean, I look outside the window and I see grey skies. I bet you in the south of France right now, it's the polar opposite of this.
I bet.
Even in October, so...
Mr. Nice. I think that was the last great Charlatans album. The one after that was at Wonderland. It came after that, quite liked it. And then they went through a period of quite a few that I just didn't think hit the mark. I lost a bit of interest at that point. But my favourite is the eponymous album, The Charlatans, which I think came out in 94, 95. That's a great album.
Yeah, that's a great album as well. I mean, I've been revisiting them recently, obviously, because of this gig coming up. He only played one Charlatan song. He played the only one I know at the end.
Was that a different version? He's got
a different arrangement in his band, but it was still amazing. Like, I mean, the whole place went mental, and he did that song "Oh My Corazon," which I don't know if you know that. It was a solo effort from a few years ago, which is a dynamite song as well. So he did that, and Charlatans are playing 18th of December at the Academy. That's sold out, but they're playing the 21st of December at it's now called the O2 Academy, Edinburgh, and there's still tickets for that. So
interesting. Let us indulge each other in our love of music, please. Those who are tuning in for the Celtic chat, we are talking about a Tim, so that's fine, and it's Tim Burgess. But yeah, please.
Tim's? Oh my God! Like, we might get.
Oh, that's not been outlawed yet, has it?
Well, who knows?
I don't find that offensive to be called a Tim. So yeah, thanks everybody for getting involved. Make sure you subscribe on a YouTube channel. You need to subscribe to comment. If you just subscribe to make snidey comments and you don't even support Celtic, then you will be blocked. But the vast majority of you are here for the Celtic and the Tim Burgess chat, so that's tremendous. Yeah. So yes, get involved and subscribe, because you will be winning prizes. We're giving away a Bobby Lennox signed print, beautifully framed. Got framers through here and the Lothians that we use, beautifully framed. We've got a signed Danny McGrain jersey. It's the Love Street one, the lime green one. That's framed. That's going to be a prize coming up. A signed Bertie Auld jersey as well, the great wee man Bertie. So these are things that are going to be given away to all subscribers, not just new subscribers, in the run-up to Christmas. So get involved in that. Get involved in ACSOM.net. Get involved in the comment section. And thank you all. Thank you. A list of ins and outs should have been drawn up for January. Johnny Ryan, you're right. I think that Bolingoli, Ayeti and Barkas must leave the building in January. And I think the accumulation of the wages and any transfer fees that you can get for those three players have to be reinvested in the squad, because we are lacking in various departments. It's been an absolute pleasure once again to speak to JP Mason. Thank you all for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.